The mournful wail of a harmonica cut through the night like a silver blade. Its notes carried on the cool breeze that swept across the Arizona Territory in the autumn of 1878. Lucas Winters sat alone on the porch of his modest ranch house just outside Wickenburg, Arizona, cradling his 1-month-old daughter against his chest as his calloused fingers coaxed a lullaby from the instrument. The baby's tiny eyes fluttered, fighting sleep despite the late hour, and Lucas wondered if she somehow knew these songs were all he had left of her mother. "That's it, little Alice," he whispered as the final notes of Abigail's favorite melody faded into the darkness. "Your mama loved that one best." His voice caught on the words, still raw with grief though 4 weeks had passed since Abigail Downs Winters had drawn her last breath. Her daughter nestled in her arms for just a few precious moments before she slipped away. Lucas gazed down at Alice's face, so like her mother's with those same deep blue eyes and the faintest dusting of golden hair. The midwife, Mrs. Thornton, had warned him that babies often didn't survive when their mothers died in childbirth. But Alice was a fighter, seemingly determined to stay in this world despite the cruel hand fate had dealt them both. "We'll make it, little one," he promised, though how he'd manage it alone, he had no earthly idea. 28 years old, and now a widower with an infant daughter in a territory that showed little mercy to the weak or unprepared. Morning came with an insistent wailing that pulled Lucas from fitful sleep. He'd placed Alice in the cradle he'd built beside his bed, the wood still smelling of fresh pine and varnish. Abigail had been so pleased when he'd finished it, running her hand over the smooth edges he'd painstakingly sanded. "Our baby will sleep like an angel in this," she'd said, her hand resting on her swollen belly, but their baby rarely slept like an angel. Alice cried with a surprising vigor that belied her tiny frame, especially in these early morning hours when the rooster hadn't yet announced the day. "I'm here, Alice," Lucas mumbled, scooping her up with practiced hands. 4 weeks had taught him much about caring for an infant, lessons he'd never expected to learn alone. He changed her soiled linen diaper with fumbling fingers, then prepared her morning bottle. Mrs. Thornton had arranged for goat's milk from the Peterson farm, after it became clear that Abigail wouldn't be there to feed their child. The elderly midwife had shown him how to warm it properly and test it on his wrist, her eyes kind but pitying as she watched the tall, broad-shouldered rancher attempt to feed the tiny infant. "You should find yourself a new wife, Mr. Winters," she'd suggested gently before leaving. "A baby needs a mother's touch." Lucas had merely nodded, unable to voice the thought that no woman could replace Abigail. Besides, who would want a grief-stricken rancher with a newborn? He'd seen the looks of sympathy mixed with apprehension from the women in town when he ventured in for supplies. Alice bundled against his chest. As the sun climbed higher, Lucas settled Alice into the sling he'd fashioned from one of Abigail's shawls. It wasn't proper, perhaps, but it kept the baby secure against him while he worked. The ranch wouldn't run itself, and the small herd of cattle needed tending regardless of his personal tragedy. "We're going to check the south pasture today, little one," he told Alice as he mounted his horse, Samson, adjusting the sling to keep her secure. "Your mama always said that was the prettiest part of our land." Lucas rode slowly, mindful of his precious cargo. The ranch wasn't large by Texas standards, just 200 acres with about 70 head of cattle, but it was theirs. He and Abigail had purchased it 3 years ago after saving every penny from his work as a ranch hand. They'd built the house together, planned their future here, dreamed of the family they would raise. Now those dreams lay buried alongside Abigail in the small cemetery at the edge of town. At the south pasture, Lucas dismounted carefully, keeping one hand on Alice as he checked the water trough. The autumn had been dry, and maintaining water for the herd required constant vigilance. As he cleared debris from the pump, Alice began to fuss. "I know, sweetheart," he murmured. "Not the most exciting day for you, is it?" A rustling in the nearby brush made Lucas straighten, his hand automatically moving to the revolver on his hip. Out here, 20 miles from Wickenburg, threats could come in many forms, from wild animals to desperate outlaws. Instead, a young woman emerged from the trees, leading a horse with a broken bridle. She froze when she spotted Lucas, her eyes widening at the sight of the baby strapped to his chest and the gun at his side. "I'm sorry to trespass," she called, her voice carrying a slight Eastern accent. "My horse threw a fit when a rattler crossed our path, broke the bridle clean through, and I've been walking for at least an hour." Lucas relaxed his stance slightly but kept his hand near his weapon. "You're a fair piece from town, miss." "I was heading to my brother's homestead," she explained, coming closer. She was dressed practically in a divided riding skirt and simple blouse, her auburn hair escaping from a once neat bun. "Samuel Davis. His place is supposed to be near Wickenburg." "Davis?" Lucas frowned. "There's a Davis place about 5 miles northeast of here. New fellow, came out from Pennsylvania last spring." The woman's face brightened. "Yes, that's my brother." She approached cautiously, her gaze drawn to the bundle against Lucas's chest. "Your baby seems rather young to be out on the range." Alice chose that moment to let out a wail that seemed impossible from such a small being. Lucas bounced gently, a motion that sometimes soothed her, but the crying continued. "She's probably hungry," he said apologetically, fumbling for the bottle in his saddlebag while trying to maintain his hold on the squirming infant. "I'm afraid I'm not very good at this yet." To his surprise, the woman stepped forward. "May I help? I practically raised my younger siblings." Lucas hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Much obliged, miss." "Amelia Davis," she replied, carefully taking Alice from the sling. She cradled the baby with practiced ease, supporting her head. "And who is this little one?" "Alice. Alice Winters, and I'm Lucas Winters." He retrieved the bottle and handed it to Amelia, watching as she expertly coaxed his daughter to take the nipple. "Where is Mrs. Winters?" Amelia asked, her eyes on Alice as the baby began to feed contentedly. The familiar pain twisted in Lucas's chest. "Gone. Childbed fever." "Alice is 4 weeks old tomorrow." Amelia's gaze lifted to his face, genuine sorrow in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Winters. That's a terrible burden to bear alone." "We manage," he said simply, though the words felt hollow. The truth was, they were barely managing. Between the ranch work and caring for Alice, Lucas rarely slept more than a few hours at a stretch. His meals were whatever he could prepare quickly, often eaten cold while rocking a fussy baby. The house had fallen into disarray, with clean laundry piling up unfolded, and dust gathering on the furniture Abigail had kept gleaming. Amelia seemed to read some of this in his face. "Well, the least I can do in return for directions to my brother's place is help you get this little angel fed and settled." Lucas should have refused her offer. A proper widower didn't invite strange women to his home, even with innocent intentions. But exhaustion clouded his judgment, and the sight of Alice contentedly feeding in Amelia's arms weakened his resolve. "I can fix your brother's bridle," he found himself saying. "Got tools back at the house, and you could rest a spell before continuing your journey." Amelia smiled, revealing a dimple in her right cheek. "That would be most appreciated, Mr. Winters." They rode double on Samson back to the ranch house, with Amelia holding Alice securely between them. Her horse followed, led by a makeshift rope Lucas had fashioned from his lariat. The closeness was unsettling for Lucas, who hadn't been so near to a woman since Abigail. He could smell the faint lavender scent of Amelia's hair, feel the warmth of her back against his chest. "Your land is beautiful," Amelia commented as they crested a hill overlooking the valley where the ranch house stood, a humble structure surrounded by a small barn, corral, and vegetable garden gone partially wild. "How long have you been here?" 3 years, Lucas replied. "Built the house myself. Abigail planted that garden. She had a way with growing things." His voice softened on his late wife's name. Amelia nodded. "I can see the care that went into this place. It's a good home for little Alice." At the house, Lucas helped Amelia dismount before taking the baby, who had fallen asleep during the ride. He led the way inside, suddenly aware of the state of his home through a stranger's eyes. Dishes were stacked haphazardly by the dry sink. Clean diapers and baby gowns lay unfolded on the table. The floor hadn't been swept in days. "Forgive the mess," he muttered, embarrassed. Amelia shook her head. "Mr. Winters, you're raising a newborn alone while running a ranch. I'd be shocked if your house looked any different." She removed her gloves and hat, setting them aside. "Why don't you settle Alice while I tidy up a bit? I'd be happy to help." Lucas wanted to refuse to maintain his pride, but the genuine offer was too tempting. "I couldn't ask you to. You didn't ask. I offered." Amelia was already rolling up her sleeves. "Consider it payment for fixing the bridle and giving me directions. Besides, I've been traveling for weeks. It feels good to be in a proper home again." While Lucas laid Alice in her cradle, Amelia filled the kettle and set it to boil. By the time he returned from the bedroom, she had cleared the table and was folding the baby linens with quick, efficient movements. "I hope you don't mind," she said, glancing up. "I find I can't sit idle when there's work to be done." "You sound like Abigail," Lucas said before he could stop himself. "She was always busy with something." Amelia smiled gently. "Tell me about her if you don't mind. It helps to speak of those we've lost." As Lucas repaired the broken bridle at the table, he found himself talking about Abigail, how they'd met at a church social in Texas when he was working as a ranch hand, how she'd agreed to marry him despite his modest prospects, how they'd saved for 3 years to buy this land. He spoke of her determination to make a real home in this harsh territory, her excitement when they learned she was expecting, her bravery until the very end. "She held Alice for just a few minutes," he said quietly, his hand stilling on the leather. "Named her, kissed her forehead, then looked at me and said, 'Sing to her every night, Lucas. Let her know she's loved.' Then she was gone." He swallowed hard. "So I do. Every night I take Alice out on the porch and play the harmonica or sing the songs Abigail loved." Amelia had stopped folding, her eyes glistening with tears. "That's beautiful, Mr. Winters. Your daughter is fortunate to have a father who honors her mother's memory so faithfully." Lucas cleared his throat, uncomfortable with her compassion. "The bridle's fixed. I should see you safely to your brother's place before it gets too late." "Of course." Amelia finished the last of the folding. "But please, let me prepare a quick meal before we leave. You look like you haven't had a proper dinner in weeks." Again, Lucas couldn't bring himself to refuse. The thought of food he hadn't had to prepare himself was too enticing. He watched as Amelia moved about his kitchen with surprising familiarity, making efficient use of the cornmeal, beans, and salt pork she found in his pantry. As they ate the simple but satisfying meal, Lucas found himself curious about this capable woman who had appeared so unexpectedly. "What brings you out to Arizona territory, Miss Davis? Most Eastern ladies prefer more civilized locales." Amelia smiled wryly. "I'm hardly a lady by Eastern standards, Mr. Winters. I worked as a schoolteacher in Pennsylvania, but after our parents died last year, Samuel suggested I join him here. He wrote of opportunities for educated women in the growing territories. She hesitated. Truth be told, I was also fleeing an unwanted suitor, the son of a local businessman who didn't understand that persistence doesn't equal courtship. Lucas nodded, understanding. The West was full of people running from something or someone. And now, he asked. Now I hope to establish a school in Wickenburg or wherever there's need. Her eyes brightened with purpose. Children deserve education even on the frontier, perhaps especially on the frontier. Just then, Alice's cries echoed from the bedroom. Lucas rose automatically, but Amelia was already on her feet. Finish your meal, she said. I'll check on her. Before Lucas could protest, Amelia had disappeared into the bedroom. He heard her soft voice speaking to Alice, the crying quickly subsiding. When she returned, she was carrying the baby, who was awake but calm, her blue eyes wide and curious. She just wanted some company, Amelia said, settling back at the table with Alice cradled in one arm. Babies this young often do. Lucas watched, a strange feeling in his chest as this woman he'd known for mere hours handled his daughter with such natural ease. For the first time since Abigail's death, the weight of his responsibility felt marginally lighter. By the time they finished eating and cleaned up, the afternoon was waning. Lucas knew they should leave soon to reach the Davis homestead before dark, yet he found himself reluctant to end Amelia's visit. We should head out, he finally said, gathering Alice from where she rested in a makeshift bed Amelia had created from a laundry basket lined with soft blankets. It's about an hour's ride to your brother's place. Amelia nodded, collecting her hat and gloves. Thank you for your hospitality, Mr. Winters, and for fixing the bridal. Least I could do after you helped with Alice and set my house to rights. Lucas hesitated. Miss Davis, I wonder if, that is, would you consider? He stopped, unsure how to phrase what he was thinking without seeming improper. Amelia waited patiently, her head tilted slightly. Lucas cleared his throat. If your brother can spare you, would you consider returning? To help with Alice sometimes. I could pay you, of course. Relief flooded her face. I was hoping you might ask. I've grown quite fond of your daughter in just these few hours, she smiled. And yes, I would be happy to help. Once I'm settled at Samuel's, perhaps I could come a few times a week. That would be a blessing, Lucas admitted. Alice deserves better care than I can manage alone. The ride to the Davis homestead was companionable, with Amelia sharing stories of her journey west and Lucas pointing out landmarks and neighbors' properties. Samuel Davis turned out to be a friendly, bearded man of about 35 who welcomed his sister with enthusiastic hugs and Lucas with a firm handshake. So you're the Winters who runs that nice spread south of here, Samuel said. Heard about your misfortune. Mighty sorry about your wife. Thank you, Lucas replied simply. Samuel glanced at Alice, then at his sister. I see you've already been playing nursemaid, Amelia. Can't say I'm surprised. Mr. Winters has kindly offered me employment caring for Alice several days a week, Amelia explained. I hope that meets with your approval. Samuel looked thoughtful. Well, I was counting on your help here, but I suppose a few days a week wouldn't hurt, and it's good, honest work. He turned to Lucas. You'll see she gets home safe each time, of course, Lucas promised. As Lucas prepared to leave, Amelia approached to say goodbye to Alice. Sleep well, little one, she murmured, touching the baby's cheek softly. To Lucas, she added, I'll come day after tomorrow if that suits you. Around 8 in the morning, Lucas nodded, suddenly eager for the day to arrive. We'll be expecting you. The ride home felt longer without Amelia's company. Alice grew fussy as darkness fell, and by the time they reached the ranch house, she was wailing in earnest. Lucas hurried inside, quickly lighting the oil lamps before changing and feeding her. As was their nightly ritual, he carried her onto the porch and settled into the rocking chair Abigail had loved. "Your mama would have liked Miss Davis," he told Alice as he gently rocked. "She's kind and capable like Mama was." He took out his harmonica and began to play softly, the melancholy tune floating into the night sky where the stars were just beginning to appear. For the first time since Abigail's death, Lucas felt a flicker of something besides grief. Not hope exactly, but perhaps the possibility that he and Alice might find their way to a life that contained more than just survival. True to her word, Amelia arrived at 8 o'clock sharp 2 days later. She rode up on a sturdy brown mare, a basket secured to the saddle. "Samuel insisted I bring provisions," she explained as Lucas helped her dismount. "He said, and I quote, 'No bachelor with a baby has enough proper food in his pantry.'" Lucas laughed, surprised by how good it felt. "Your brother might be right about that." Amelia proved to be a godsend. She not only cared for Alice with gentle efficiency, but also set about restoring order to the household. She showed Lucas better ways to change and swaddle the baby, prepared meals that could be easily reheated, and even found time to tend Abigail's neglected garden. "These tomato plants are still producing," she noted one afternoon in late October as she gathered the ripe fruit. "And there's plenty of squash. If you don't mind, I could put up some preserves before winter." Lucas, who had just returned from checking cattle in the north pasture, watched her work with growing admiration. "You don't have to do all this, Miss Davis. Looking after Alice is plenty." Amelia smiled up at him from where she knelt among the squash vines. "I enjoy it, Mr. Winters. Honest work has always been my preference to sitting idle." She hesitated. "Besides, it feels good to be needed." Those words resonated with Lucas, who had felt so adrift in his grief. Needed, yes. Alice needed him, and he needed this capable, kind woman who had appeared in their lives like an answer to an unspoken prayer. October gave way to November, and Amelia became a regular presence at the ranch, arriving 3 days a week like clockwork. On Sundays, Lucas would take Alice to church in Wickenburg, where Amelia would meet them, having ridden in with her brother. The townsfolk quickly noted the arrangement, and Lucas couldn't help overhearing the whispered speculations about the handsome widower and the Eastern school teacher. "You know they're talking," he said to Amelia one Sunday after services, as they walked together down Wickenburg's Main Street, Lucas carrying Alice in her baptismal gown. Amelia adjusted her bonnet against the late autumn sun. "People will always talk, Mr. Winters. It matters little to me what they say, so long as we know our arrangement is proper and beneficial for Alice." Lucas nodded, though he had begun to wonder if his feelings toward Amelia remained entirely proper. He found himself looking forward to her visits with increasing anticipation, missing her steady presence on the days she didn't come. At night, when he sang to Alice, he sometimes imagined Amelia sitting beside them, her sweet voice joining his. As Thanksgiving approached, Samuel Davis invited Lucas and Alice to join them for the holiday meal. "It'll just be us otherwise," Samuel explained after Sunday services. "And no one should be alone on Thanksgiving, especially not with a little one." Lucas accepted gratefully. The thought of celebrating his first holiday without Abigail had been weighing on him, and the prospect of sharing the day with friendly faces eased that burden. On Thanksgiving morning, Lucas dressed Alice in her finest gown, a delicate thing Abigail had sewn during her pregnancy, embroidered with tiny flowers around the collar. He polished his boots, trimmed his beard, and wore the good shirt Abigail had given him last Christmas. The preparations felt like a tribute to her, a way of honoring her memory by continuing traditions she had valued. The Davis homestead was modest but welcoming, with a sturdy cabin and newly built barn. Samuel had cleared about 40 acres and planted wheat, which had yielded a reasonable harvest for a first-year crop. Inside, Amelia had transformed the simple cabin into a warm haven, with autumn leaves and berries arranged in jars, clean curtains at the windows, and delicious scents emanating from the kitchen. She greeted them at the door, her face flushed from cooking. "Welcome. Let me take Alice while you get settled." As she lifted the baby from Lucas's arms, her fingers brushed against his, sending an unexpected warmth through him. The meal was the finest Lucas had eaten in months: roast wild turkey, cornbread stuffing, mashed potatoes, squash from his own garden, and apple pie for dessert. Throughout the meal, he watched Amelia, noting how she seamlessly cared for Alice while participating in the conversation and ensuring everyone's plates remained full. After they had eaten their fill, Samuel insisted on showing Lucas his plans for spring planting, leaving Amelia to tend to Alice in the cabin. "Your sister is a remarkable woman," Lucas commented as they walked the property. "You're fortunate to have her here." Samuel gave him a knowing look. "She spent more time at your place than mine these past weeks." Lucas felt heat rise in his face. "She's been a great help with Alice. I don't know how I'd have managed otherwise." Samuel stopped, turning to face Lucas directly. "Winters, I'm going to speak plainly as men should. My sister deserves happiness. She came west partly to escape a man who wouldn't take no for an answer, but also because life held little joy for her back east after our parents died. I've seen how she lights up when she speaks of you and little Alice." Lucas swallowed hard. "I hold Miss Davis in the highest regard." "Regard?" Samuel raised an eyebrow. "Is that all it is?" The question hung in the air between them. Lucas thought of Amelia's smile, her gentle hands with Alice, the way his heart lifted when she appeared on the horizon riding toward his ranch. "It hasn't been a year since Abigail passed," Lucas finally said, his voice rough. "I made vows to her." Samuel nodded slowly. "And you honored those vows by all accounts. But Lucas, I've lived out here long enough to know that life is precious and often short. Abigail would want Alice to have a mother, wouldn't she? And you to have a companion." The question stayed with Lucas throughout the remainder of their visit, and on the quiet ride home, Alice sleeping peacefully in her sling against his chest. Would Abigail want him to find happiness again? To give Alice a mother's love? The thought both comforted and troubled him. That night, as he sang to Alice under the stars, Lucas allowed himself to imagine a future different from the lonely path he had envisioned after Abigail's death. A future with laughter in his home again, with a partner to share the joys and burdens of raising Alice, with perhaps even more children to fill the rooms he had built with such hope. The first snow of winter arrived in early December, dusting the high desert with white. Amelia appeared that morning despite the weather, her cloak dusted with snowflakes, her cheeks rosy from the cold. "You shouldn't have come in this," Lucas scolded gently as he helped her remove her snow-covered garments. "The trails can be treacherous." "And leave you and Alice alone in the first snow," Amelia smiled, reaching for the baby who was watching from her basket near the fire. "Besides, it's hardly a blizzard, just a pretty dusting to remind us that Christmas is coming." Christmas. Another milestone Lucas had been dreading. Last year, he and Abigail had celebrated with such joy, anticipating the baby that would arrive in the new year. How could he face the holiday without her? Amelia seemed to read his thoughts. "Samuel and I were hoping you and Alice might join us for Christmas Eve." Nothing elaborate, just dinner and perhaps some carols. Samuel even found a small pine we could decorate. The invitation touched Lucas deeply. "That's mighty kind. We'd be honored to join you." Amelia bounced Alice gently. Good. Every child's first Christmas should be special, even if she's too young to remember it. She hesitated. I've been making her a gift, a little quilt with some of the fabric scraps I found in the trunk in your bedroom. I hope that wasn't presumptuous of me. No, Lucas said quickly. Abigail would be pleased. She was saving those for quilting someday. He swallowed past the lump in his throat. What can I bring for the celebration? Just yourselves, Amelia replied. And perhaps your harmonica. Alice isn't the only one who enjoys your playing. The confession brought a smile to Lucas's face. I'd be happy to provide some music, though I warn you, my singing voice leaves much to be desired. I doubt that very much, Amelia said softly, her eyes meeting his with an expression that made his heart beat faster. The days leading up to Christmas were filled with subtle preparations. Lucas repaired a rocking horse he'd found in Wickenburg's general store, slightly damaged and selling at a discount. At night, after Alice was asleep, he worked on it by lamplight, sanding the rough edges and reattaching the mane that had come loose. Though she was too young to use it now, he liked to imagine her growing into it, her delighted face when she was old enough to rock back and forth. On December 23rd, a package arrived from Lucas's parents in Texas, a beautiful christening gown for Alice, finer than anything available in Wickenburg, and a letter expressing their hope to visit in the spring when travel was easier. They had been devastated by Abigail's death, but heartened to hear, through Lucas's infrequent letters, that he and Alice were managing with help from the schoolteacher neighbor. Your parents sound wonderful, Amelia commented when Lucas showed her the gown the next day. Alice is fortunate to have grandparents who care so much. They were heartbroken when Abigail died, Lucas said, carefully folding the delicate garment. She was the daughter they never had, but they've been supportive in their way despite the distance. As Amelia prepared to leave that afternoon, Lucas found himself reluctant to see her go. Will you be safe riding back? The temperature's dropping. I'll be fine, she assured him, buttoning her cloak. Samuel would already be worried if not for our plans tomorrow. She smiled. What time should we expect you for Christmas Eve? Would 4 o'clock be too early? Lucas asked. I thought we might want to return before full dark, given the weather. 4 is perfect. It will give us time for dinner and some Christmas cheer before you need to head back. She bent to kiss Alice goodbye, then straightened, suddenly seeming shy. Until tomorrow, then. Lucas watched her ride away, the slender figure growing smaller against the winter landscape. Only when she disappeared over the hill did he turn back to the house, Alice warm against his chest. Tomorrow is Christmas Eve, little one, he told her as they entered the warmth of the cabin. Your first Christmas. Your mama would have made it so special for you. He swallowed hard. We'll do our best to honor her, you and me. Christmas Eve dawned clear and cold, the earlier snow still clinging to the shadowed places. Lucas spent the morning tending to essential ranch chores, then bathed and dressed with unusual care. For Alice, he chose the delicate gown his parents had sent, wrapping her warmly against the December chill. As they rode toward the Davis homestead, Lucas found himself unaccountably nervous. He'd faced stampeding cattle with less trepidation than he felt approaching this Christmas celebration. Perhaps because, for the first time since Abigail's death, he was allowing himself to feel something like happiness, and the guilt of that happiness weighed on him. Samuel greeted them at the door with a broad smile. Merry Christmas, Winters, and to you too, Miss Alice. He ushered them inside, where the cabin had been transformed. Candles glowed in the windows, pine boughs decorated the mantel, and in the corner stood a small tree adorned with paper stars, dried berries, and what appeared to be carefully carved wooden ornaments. Amelia's in the kitchen, Samuel said, taking their coats. "Been cooking up a storm since dawn." As if on cue, Amelia appeared in the kitchen doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. Her hair was arranged more elaborately than usual, with soft curls framing her face, and she wore a pretty green dress Lucas hadn't seen before. "Welcome," she said warmly. "Merry Christmas, Lucas Alice." It was the first time she had used his given name, and the sound of it in her voice made his heart skip. The evening unfolded like a dream Lucas hadn't dared to have. They ate a feast of roast venison, winter vegetables, and fresh bread, followed by a spice cake Amelia had made specially. After dinner, they gathered around the small tree, where simple gifts were exchanged. Samuel had carved a beautiful wooden box for Amelia and a toy rattle for Alice. Amelia presented her brother with knitted gloves and Lucas with a hand-bound book of poetry. "It was my father's," she explained softly. "He used to read from it on winter evenings." Lucas was touched beyond words. "I can't accept something so precious. Please," Amelia insisted. "It should belong to someone who will appreciate it." Her eyes held his. "Someone who understands the value of words and memories." For Alice, Amelia had indeed created a beautiful small quilt, each square telling a story: flowers for the garden, a horse for the ranch, stars for the night sky where Lucas sang to her. "This is extraordinary," Lucas said, running his fingers over the fine stitching. "A true heirloom. Thank you, Amelia." His own gift seemed humble in comparison: a hand-carved wooden spoon for Samuel, and for Amelia, a simple silver hairpin he'd purchased in Wickenburg, his sole extravagance since Abigail's death. "It's beautiful," Amelia whispered, holding the pin to the candlelight. "I shall treasure it." As the evening progressed, Lucas fulfilled his promise to play the harmonica. The melancholy tunes he usually played for Alice gave way to Christmas carols, with Amelia and Samuel joining in singing. Alice, remarkably, remained content throughout, her wide eyes taking in the candles and decorations with apparent fascination. When it came time to leave, Samuel insisted on walking out to help Lucas saddle his horse. "Snow's picking up again," he observed, glancing at the sky where fat flakes had begun to fall. "Sure you don't want to stay the night? We could make up pallets by the fire." Lucas was tempted, particularly as the wind had indeed strengthened, but the thought of imposing further on their hospitality held him back. "We'll be fine. It's not far, and Samson knows the way even in the dark." Samuel nodded. "If you're sure, but don't push it if the weather worsens. Find shelter if needed." Inside, Amelia was bundling Alice in extra blankets for the journey. "Are you certain you should go? The snow's getting heavier." "We'll be home before it gets too bad," Lucas assured her, though less confidently than he'd spoken to Samuel. "Thank you for this evening." It was more than I could have hoped for Alice's first Christmas. Amelia's eyes softened. "It was our pleasure, truly." She hesitated, then reached into her pocket. "I have one more small gift, for both of you, really." She pressed a small object into his hand, a silver locket on a delicate chain. Inside was a tiny sketch of Alice, remarkably lifelike despite its size. "I thought perhaps, someday, Alice might want something to remember this Christmas by." Lucas was speechless, moved beyond words by the thoughtfulness of the gift. Without thinking, he leaned forward and kissed Amelia's cheek. "Thank you," he murmured, "for everything." The blush that rose to her face was visible even in the dim light of the entry. "Safe journey, Lucas. See you in 2 days." "Looking forward to it," he replied, meaning it more than he could express. The ride home proved more challenging than Lucas had anticipated. The snow was falling steadily now, reducing visibility and making the trail slippery. He kept Alice tucked securely against him, checking frequently to ensure she remained warm. Samson moved cautiously, his ears flicking back occasionally as if seeking reassurance. They had traveled perhaps halfway when the wind shifted, bringing with it a blinding curtain of snow. Lucas pulled up, momentarily disoriented as familiar landmarks disappeared in the whiteness. Alice began to fuss, sensing his tension. "It's all right, little one," he murmured, though his confidence was waning. The temperature was dropping rapidly, and being caught in a full blizzard with an infant would be disastrous. Lucas weighed his options. Turning back to the Davis place might be safest, but that would mean retracing their path through worsening conditions. Pressing forward was risky if he couldn't maintain his bearings. Just as he was about to make a decision, a flicker of light appeared through the snow, a lantern bobbing in the distance. "Hello," he called, his voice carried away by the wind. The light grew closer, and to Lucas's immense relief, a familiar figure emerged from the swirling snow. Amelia, wrapped in heavy clothes, was leading her mare through the storm. "I knew you'd try to make it home," she shouted over the wind. "Samuel said I was foolish to follow, but I couldn't bear thinking of you two out in this." Lucas had never been so glad to see anyone in his life. "How did you find us?" "There's really only one trail between our places," she said practically. "And I know you ride slowly with Alice. Are you both all right?" "Cold but fine," Lucas confirmed. "But we can't stay out here. The storm's worsening." Amelia nodded. "There's the old line shack about a quarter-mile east. Do you know it?" Lucas did a basic shelter used during roundups, with a small stove and crude bunks. It wasn't much, but it would provide refuge from the storm. "Can you lead the way? My sense of direction is compromised in this whiteout." "Of course." Amelia turned her horse, moving confidently despite the conditions. Lucas followed, one hand on Alice, the other on Samson's reins, grateful beyond measure for Amelia's presence. The line shack appeared suddenly through the snow, a dark shape against the white. Inside, it was basic but sound, with a small iron stove, 2 narrow bunks, and a rough table with a single chair. Most importantly, it was dry and out of the wind. "There should be firewood stacked behind the stove," Lucas said as they entered, immediately moving to check Alice, who was thankfully still warm in her multiple layers. Amelia found the wood and quickly set about building a fire while Lucas settled Alice on one of the bunks, surrounding her with blankets to keep her from rolling. Within minutes, the small stove was radiating welcome heat, and they could remove their snow-covered outer garments. "You saved us," Lucas said simply, watching Amelia move efficiently around the tiny space. "I don't know if we would have found our way home in this." Amelia brushed off his gratitude. "Anyone would have done the same. Besides, I couldn't bear the thought of anything happening to you too." She glanced at Alice, who had fallen asleep, exhausted from the excitement and the journey. "She's remarkable, staying so calm through all this." "She's her mother's daughter," Lucas said softly. "Abigail never complained, no matter how difficult things got." He paused, then added, "But she's like you in that way too, strong, resilient." The comment brought a flush to Amelia's cheeks. "That's kind of you to say." They settled into a companionable silence, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the howling wind outside. Lucas checked their provisions. He had a canteen of water and some jerky in his saddlebags, while Amelia had thought to bring bread and cheese, anticipating they might need sustenance. "We'll be comfortable enough until morning," Amelia said, arranging their simple meal on the table. "The storm should pass by then." As they ate by the light of the single candle Amelia had found in a cupboard, Lucas found himself studying her face, the gentle curve of her cheek, the determined set of her chin, the warmth in her eyes. How different she was from Abigail, who had been fair where Amelia was dark, petite where Amelia was tall. Yet both possessed the same inner strength, the same generous heart. "What are you thinking?" Amelia asked, catching his gaze. Lucas considered deflecting but chose honesty instead. "I was thinking about how grateful I am that you came into our lives. These past months would have been unbearable without you." "I feel the same," she admitted quietly. "Coming west was a leap of faith I never expected to find." She trailed off, looking down at her hands. "To find what?" Lucas prompted gently. Amelia met his eyes again. "A purpose, a place where I truly feel needed, with you and Alice." The confession hung in the air between them, weighted with unspoken feelings. Outside, the wind moaned around the corners of the shack, emphasizing their isolation and, paradoxically, their closeness. "Amelia," Lucas began, his voice rough with emotion, "I need to say something, and I hope you won't think less of me for it." He took a deep breath. "When Abigail died, I thought my heart died with her. I couldn't imagine ever feeling anything again except grief and responsibility toward Alice. But these past months, because of you, I've started to feel alive again." Amelia's eyes glistened in the candlelight. "Lucas, you don't have to, please let me finish," he said gently. "I loved my wife deeply, and a part of me will always mourn her loss, but Abigail was practical about life and its hardships. She made me promise before Alice was born that if anything happened to her, I wouldn't lose myself in grief. Life is for the living," she said. Lucas reached across the table, tentatively taking Amelia's hand. "I'm beginning to understand what she meant. And I believe she would want Alice to have a mother who loves her, and me to have a partner to share this life with." Tears spilled onto Amelia's cheeks. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying that I care for you, Amelia. Deeply. More than I thought possible. And if you could see yourself building a life with a widower and his daughter, I would be the most fortunate man in Arizona territory." For a moment, Amelia was silent, and Lucas feared he had misread everything, had overstepped boundaries that shouldn't be crossed. Then she squeezed his hand, a tremulous smile breaking through her tears. "Lucas Winters, I have come to love both you and Alice with all my heart. Nothing would bring me greater joy than to build a life with you." Relief and happiness surged through Lucas. He stood, drawing Amelia up with him, and pulled her gently into his arms. Their first kiss was tender, hesitant, a promise rather than a passion. When they separated, both were smiling despite the tears that threatened. "This isn't how I imagined proposing," Lucas admitted with a small laugh. "Stranded in a lined shack during a blizzard." "It's perfect," Amelia countered. "A story to tell Alice when she's older." They spent the night talking softly by the fire, planning their future together, checking periodically on Alice, who slept peacefully through the storm. By morning, the blizzard had passed, leaving a transformed landscape of pristine white. The sky was clear, the sun brilliant on the snow as they prepared to leave the shelter that had witnessed their commitment to each other. "Samuel will be worried sick," Amelia said as they saddled the horses. "And probably ready to mount a rescue mission. He'll be even more surprised when we tell him our news," Lucas replied, securing Alice in her sling. "Do you think he'll approve?" Amelia smiled confidently. "He's been hoping for this since October. I suspect he'll be quite pleased with himself." The ride back to the Davis homestead was like traveling through a wonderland, the familiar landscape made new by the blanket of snow. Samuel was indeed preparing to search for them, his relief at their appearance quickly giving way to knowing satisfaction when they shared their news. "About time," he declared, clapping Lucas on the shoulder. "I was beginning to think you were blind, Winters." The following weeks passed in a blur of preparations. Lucas and Amelia decided on a simple wedding in early February, long enough to prepare properly, but soon enough to start their life together without unnecessary delay. The news spread quickly through Wickenburg, met with general approval, and only a few raised eyebrows at the relatively short time since Abigail's passing. "People will talk," Lucas said worriedly one evening as they sat on his porch, Alice sleeping inside. "I don't want your reputation harmed." Amelia took his hand firmly. "Let them talk. We know the truth of our hearts, and that's what matters. Besides, no one who sees us together could doubt the sincerity of our feelings." She was right, as usual. Even the most traditional members of the community softened when they witnessed Lucas and Amelia together with Alice, the natural affection between them evident to anyone with eyes to see. Their wedding day arrived on a surprisingly mild February morning. The small church in Wickenburg was filled with well-wishers. Samuel, as Lucas's best man; Mrs. Thornton, the midwife who had delivered Alice, holding the baby during the ceremony; neighbors from surrounding ranches, and even the storekeeper and bank manager who had come to respect Lucas over the years. Amelia wore a simple blue dress rather than traditional white, a nod to the practical reality of their situation. But she had never looked more beautiful to Lucas. As they exchanged vows, Lucas felt Abigail's presence not as a shadow but as a blessing, a sense that she approved of this new chapter in their lives. The celebration afterward was held at the ranch, which had been transformed under Amelia's care in the weeks leading up to the wedding. The garden had been prepared for spring planting, the house thoroughly cleaned and reorganized, curtains that Abigail had started finally completed and hung at the windows. It was still the home Lucas had built with Abigail, but now it held the promise of new memories, new joys. As evening fell, the guests departed, leaving the new family alone. Alice, overstimulated by the day's events, was fussy until Amelia took her onto the porch, motioning for Lucas to follow with his harmonica. "I think she needs her nightly serenade," Amelia said softly, rocking the baby in the chair that had been Abigail's favorite spot. Lucas nodded, throat tight with emotion, as he settled beside them and began to play. The familiar melody drifted into the February night, but this time it didn't carry the weight of solitary grief. Instead, it felt like a bridge between past and future, honoring what had been lost while celebrating what had been found. Alice's eyes drifted closed, her tiny hand curled around Amelia's finger. Lucas lowered the harmonica, watching his daughter and his new wife in the gentle light spilling from the cabin windows. "I never thought I could be this happy again," he confessed quietly. "It feels almost undeserved." Amelia's eyes met his, full of understanding. "Happiness isn't something we earn, Lucas. It's a gift we accept with grateful hearts." She looked down at Alice, sleeping peacefully now. "And we honor those we've lost by embracing that gift fully." In that moment, Lucas knew she was right. The road ahead would have its challenges: raising Alice, expanding the ranch, perhaps adding to their family someday, but they would face it together, strengthened by the love they had found in each other, and their shared devotion to the little girl who had brought them together. Spring arrived early that year, bringing with it new growth across the range. By April, the garden Amelia had carefully planned was sprouting vigorously, and Alice was sitting up on her own, babbling happily whenever Lucas or Amelia entered the room. On the anniversary of Abigail's death, they took Alice to the cemetery, placing wildflowers on the grave and telling her stories of the mother who had loved her so briefly but so deeply. "She would be proud of you," Amelia told Lucas as they walked home, Alice reaching curiously for the wildflowers they passed. "Of how you've raised Alice, of the father you've become." "And of how I found you," Lucas added, taking her hand. "I believe that with all my heart." That night, following their established ritual, the three of them sat on the porch as the stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky. Lucas played his harmonica while Amelia sang softly, her clear voice blending perfectly with the melancholy notes. Alice watched them both with wide, contented eyes, secure in the knowledge, even if she couldn't articulate it, that she was deeply loved. As the final notes faded into the night, Lucas looked at his wife and daughter, illuminated by the soft glow from the cabin windows. His heart felt full to bursting with gratitude for this second chance at happiness, for the family they were building together on this land he loved. "What are you thinking?" Amelia asked, noticing his expression. Lucas smiled, putting into words the feeling that had been growing in him since that Christmas Eve in the line shack. "I'm thinking that love doesn't divide when you share it, it multiplies. Loving you doesn't diminish what I felt for Abigail. It honors it." He touched Alice's cheek gently. "And loving Alice together makes that love even stronger." Amelia leaned her head against his shoulder. "That's beautiful, Lucas. And true." They sat together in comfortable silence, a family forged through loss and found in love as the stars continued their ancient dance above the Arizona desert. The nightly ritual that had begun as a promise to a dying woman had transformed into a celebration of the family. They had become a cowboy who had lost his first love, the daughter who connected him to that love, and the woman who had helped them both find their way to joy again. In the years that followed, their family grew. A son joined them the following spring, Samuel Lucas Winters, named for the brother who had helped bring them together. 2 years later, twin girls completed their family, Abigail Rose and Elizabeth Grace, honoring both the mother Alice had lost and Amelia's own mother. The ranch prospered under their joint care, expanding to include more cattle and several fine horses that Lucas bred and trained. Amelia eventually realized her dream of establishing a school, teaching not only their children but those from neighboring ranches in a small building Lucas constructed near their home. And every night without fail, no matter how busy or tired they might be, Lucas would take out his harmonica as twilight descended, gathering his family on the porch to sing the songs that had once been his solitary communion with grief, but had transformed into their family's celebration of love and remembrance. Alice grew into a thoughtful, capable young woman with her mother's golden hair and her father's steady determination. She knew the story of her birth and the mother who had held her just once, and she treasured both the mother who had given her life and the one who had helped raise her with equal devotion. On Alice's 18th birthday, Lucas presented her with a journal Abigail had written during her pregnancy, filled with hopes and dreams for the child she carried. That night, as they gathered for their musical tradition, Alice asked to play the harmonica herself, a skill she had been secretly practicing. As the familiar melody soared into the darkening sky, Lucas held Amelia's hand, watching their oldest child carry forward the tradition that had sustained him through his darkest days. The music that had once been a lament for what was lost had become a celebration of all they had found, a family built on love, resilience, and the healing power of a simple song played under the stars.